Yo, yo, what up? This is Jacob Sokol, founder of Sensiphy, and welcome to Quadruple Your Coaching Biz. If you're already a successful coach, but want to take your biz to the next level with more ease, more fun, and more impact, then get ready. This interview is with David Taylor. David is the founder of the Love, Serve, Create experience and the 7-figure coach movement, aiming to impact the lives of 1 million people who are disadvantaged through poverty, discrimination, or oppression. David used to work in corporate America, creating fundamental changes in organizations, and since then he's become an entrepreneur who's established 2 7-figure businesses. I'm always excited to dive into someone who's years ahead of me in this process, and that's what we're doing today. So we're going to explore big ideas like how to have a $50,000 enrollment conversation. We're going to go into a process for finding your money-limiting beliefs and how to overcome them. We'll also look at how David filled his entire coaching practice in 1 month with ideal clients. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for asking me.
Yeah, well, my pleasure, and I'm excited to unpack some of your wisdom. You are a veteran coach. I've been coaching for a couple of years. I have a feeling you've been coaching for a couple of years more than that. And how long have you been coaching?
I would say I gave myself that official title 9 years ago. But I'd say it varies. I started on a journey of personal development in the mid-90s. I had an opportunity to go on this thing called a peak performance program. It taught a lot of what in those days were NLP techniques and the Tony Robbins work. So I started doing it in my business, in the business I was working in and coaching my people and training my people. And then I set up my own 9 years ago, a company called the Freedom Factory. And I called myself a coach and a trainer. And I think in that journey, in the last 9 years, I've been a bit of consulting, a bit of mentoring, and a bit of coaching. And the last 2 or 3 years, it's really intensified to being pure, more and more pure coaching.
Got it. And you did some work with some of Tony Robbins' people, is that right?
So what triggered the 10 years ago was the first time I saw Tony Robbins live. And it was a big impact on me. You know, I had done a lot of his work in books and all that sort of stuff, like people buy the tapes. And I'm not very good at tapes. I'll be honest with that. I'm not very good at listening to tapes. I like seeing people live. I saw him live, it was a big impact. And over the following year, I transitioned what I was doing to then set up my own business. And part of that was because I wanted to work with Tony. And so in the end of 2006, I was invited to become one of his trainers. It's kind of this process he goes through. It's by invitation only. You can't apply. You serve an apprenticeship, and if they like you, you get invited in. So I've been doing that since 2006, 2007. And in fact, I'm going over to Florida next week to work at the Date with Destiny event. And there'll be about 50 trainers there, 2,500 people, and Tony on stage.
Wow, that's got to be a thrill. So cool, dude. Well, I'm curious, in your own business, has there been either a period of time or maybe a year where things just grew exponentially?
Yeah, the last year. I mean, there's no doubt the last year, and it's still going exponential.
So and beautiful.
I even said that yesterday. I think I was sharing some stuff on Facebook, and I said that I felt really blessed because at the moment everything I'm touching is going exponential. I don't claim to understand all of it. I touch things and it happens, and that's been going over the last year, more and more showing up.
So let's unpack that a little bit. We're not going to let you get away with I don't understand how it's happening. Tell us a little bit. What do you imagine is the cause of it?
I think there's several things. I mean, I think it's worth going back 2 years because, as I say, I set my business up 9 years ago, and it was a real mix of coaching and training and a bit of consulting, and I didn't differentiate those pieces. And so people didn't come to me specifically for coaching. They came to me for help, and that help might show up in different ways. And I was getting drawn quite a lot back into corporate life. And I'd come from corporate life, I'd done that, I'd done big business, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And so just over 2 years ago, I kind of drew a line and said, I'm going to stop doing that, I'm going to focus on something else. I actually took a year out, not purely away from coaching, it was a year to invest in different ways of marketing, creating and selling personal development, change, transformation, and coaching, different forms of that. And, there are some pretty famous people around the world, and they will sell you the six-figure business and the seven-figure business and different ways of doing it, a lot of online gurus out there. And I took a year out doing that. And then I discovered what really worked for me. And it was so simple. It was blindingly obvious. Why hadn't I seen this before? And the simplicity was, as a coach, if I personally connect with people and I unconditionally serve them, amazing things happen. Because I was trying all this marketing stuff, and marketing creates, I think Steve Chandler said it, marketing creates distance. And when I tried marketing, it didn't happen. It didn't work. I'd get some interaction, but not very much. So I think what started that journey of going exponential was, first of all, creating that personal connection, those conversations that I would serve unconditionally. If people wanted to become one of my clients, that's fantastic. If they didn't, that was fantastic too. And in January, I created a community to talk about this. And it was a closed group on Facebook. It was the easiest way to do it. It wasn't a Facebook page. It wasn't a blog. It was simply a space that was private and closed. And I think it started with 4 people. And by continuing the conversations in there, as well as face-to-face, that's grown to 350 people now. It's really interactive every day. There are people joining and sharing experiences and asking questions. And that's reflected outside of that space as well in my conversations in real life, that every day more and more conversations are happening. And what I'm noticing, it's a little bit like the 6 degrees of separation, is that I'm calling things out. And literally minutes, hours, maybe a couple of days later, the answer will be there. Things that seemed impossible. And if I take a moment to share a story, recently I shared what I thought was an impossible dream of mine. So in May, we went to Liberia with a group of coaches, and we went to serve in schools and with teachers, and we went to remote villages and delivered water systems. And it was an amazing transformational experience. And one of the most powerful things for me was we had a free day at the end. I had one day at the end. There were a few of us stayed behind. And I had heard of an orphanage just outside the hotel we were staying in. And it was so weird. All week we'd been in this kind of air-conditioned minivan convoy. We'd been taken everywhere. It was like being a president. We were driven everywhere, and we were always escorted. And there I was on the last day, and I was at the boundary of the hotel at the security gate. And I was nervous about stepping over that line. It was an invisible line, but I kind of had a little fear showing up. And I stepped over that line, and I walked down the road into real Liberia. And it was just an amazingly liberating experience. And eventually found this little orphanage, 29 children. And I said to them, how can I help you? And they said, we've just run out of food. And so we used one of the minivans. We went to the supermarket. We bought a little rice and pulses and nuts and all this stuff. At that time, I made a commitment to help Martha run her orphanage. And then Ebola came and it got really bad, and food prices went up, and so she needed money. And so I committed to help take care of her for the next year. Now, she came back to me and said, David, I rent this building. What I really want is a house in the country with a garden. We can grow vegetables. We can make produce. The kids will be safe. That's what I really want. Can you help me? And I said, how much do you need? She said, $100,000. And actually, it really spoke to me, because I'd already started to help Martha. I really want to make this happen. So 2 weeks ago, I said, I want my miracle, my impossible dream is to have Martha have a sustainable orphanage. Literally the same day, somebody I had met in LA said, oh, actually, I've got connections in Liberia. I might be able to help you. And she's actually very powerfully connected to one of the schools we visited. And she came back again 10 days later and said, actually, one of my clients has a house in Liberia with a garden, and she's thinking of turning it into an orphanage. It's in Painesville. Would that be any use to you? Liberia is about the size of England. Painesville is 3 miles away from Martha's orphanage. So that's what I mean by going exponential. Just what seemed like an impossible thing. I can't go to Liberia until the Ebola's gone. I promised that to my family.
Yeah.
And yet, simply by calling it out, here I am 12, 14 days later with a very real possibility that could happen. That's just crazy. So it's happening because the connections are happening. It's happening because conversations are happening. And the more and more conversations and connections that are made, it makes everything exponential.
So for the person who's watching now, who's like, that is incredible, how did he do it? How do we translate that into whether it's action or a place of being or maybe both? How do we bring that into the viewer's reality right now so that they can take this and bring it forward themselves?
That's a great question. So I think there's three parts. I think the first piece is action. No matter how ready you are, you're ready. Create connections, have conversations. I work with people that say, well, I don't know if I'm a great coach yet. Well, if you don't talk to anybody, you'll never find out. Talk to people, have conversations. And what I say to people is, and this is what I do, I don't call what I do coaching. I meet with people and I say, let's have a conversation. And it takes all expectations away. There's no frame, there's no expectation. It's simply a conversation. And that creates a space for a very powerful conversation. Now, the power of that conversation is from a place of being. The thing that I've learned more and more over the last year, and especially with coaches I work with, it was my journey, and certainly for the coaches I work with, is this idea of the service being unconditional. If you have a conversation with someone with an expectation they could become a client, it creates distance. And everything that I work on is about, does it create intimacy or does it create distance? Expectation creates distance. Serving powerfully, being unconditional, being present creates intimacy. So I focus on what brings intimacy into that conversation. That creates a space for transformation. So a place of being is being unconditional. And I think the third piece is what I talked about when I was in Liberia.
Can I jump in? Because that was so powerful.
Yeah.
I actually want to go deeper into that.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so remember the third thing so we can get to that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said expectation creates distance and unconditional service creates intimacy. Am I getting that right? Yeah. That's really powerful. So for the people who are watching right now who are already successful coaches, but they want to just step it up to the next level. They want to move beyond this sense of what's possible and mediocrity and just go beyond. Where is the trap in there? Because I can almost see, what I mean by that is I can almost see some people saying, well, if I just serve unconditionally and serve unconditionally, that it might not actually grow my business or be reciprocated. And so how do we find the distinction between, I'm going to spend as much time with this person as it takes for them to have that profound breakthrough and insight, and then at that point, once they have that profound breakthrough and insight, being so unattached to continuing to engage with each other and work?
Sure. So I think there's a couple of ways of looking at that. I think the unconditional element is, it sounds crazy because we're professional coaches, we need to make money, and yet it's unconditional. If I think of someone I've been working with for the past 15 months, an incredibly powerful woman, I have served her powerfully for 15 months, and she's never paid me a penny. And at one time, about 3 months ago, she became close to becoming a client and chose not to. And yet I serve her anyway. There are other people I might talk to for 40 minutes, and they become a $10,000, $20,000 client. So, I'm being realistic there. It's not that I don't make proposals. If people want to work with me, I'll make a proposal. And yet, I will work with people truly unconditionally. That's the first piece, and that's hard because people say to me, well, I work with someone for 12 hours, where's the return on investment?
Yeah.
Dude, that's conditional. It's unconditional, Yeah. And I work with coaching apprentices, and I say, right, you've got a month, you've got to have at least 5 conversations a week, preferably 10, and you're not allowed to enroll anybody. And they go, well, I don't care. You don't enroll because I want to get it in the mindset of purely serving.
Yeah.
And I think the second piece is, which goes to your point, you could unconditionally serve and still end up in mediocrity. Who do you start those conversations with? So start conversations with people that really inspire you. And that's been a learning for me because I've heard this before and I wasn't really sure about it. And now I'm getting it. There's a lady I'm working with at the moment She's from India. And, when I first started working with her, on the surface, she would look like a mediocre client. She's kind of a mid-level project manager at an IT company, and she wanted to get a promotion. This is a year later. We're starting another program of work together. She's created a cooperative for 75 women in India who had nothing. They were below the calorific poverty line. They were below the economic poverty line. And she's brought them into economic safety. So not just impacting them, impacting their families, their children, their sisters and cousins, bringing real promise of prosperity. Her commitment in this coaching program is to grow that to 1,000 people. So sometimes you just have a sense that someone's got something, and then that comes from it. Other people, they already come with that. They already come with this idea of, I want to impact 1,000 people or 10,000 people, make a real difference. Then I'll serve them until I'm done, or they're done, or we work together. Either way, it doesn't matter. Find that person that inspires you, then you start raising the game. That goes from mediocrity to awesomeness.
And you said you were just starting to really get that this year. What's the part that kind of shifted for you that maybe you understood intellectually but now has become embodied?
I guess the simplest way of describing that is I'm seeing it in front of me. And I think that the journey I've been on is, I think I used to set my goals. I'm not big on goals, but I think that I set my goals, if I had them, too low. So almost like the Martha's Orphanage, it seemed like impossible. And then suddenly, very quickly, it seemed it was going to happen within a few weeks. And so I'm now thinking, well, what if I set my standard really high so that it really makes a difference? And so I created this crazy idea. If you're a coach on Facebook, you always see this advert, become a 7-figure coach. And it's some funnel system, and you can be a 7-figure coach, no face-to-face work, stay in bed, don't walk the dog. I mean, it's bullshit, But I thought, I want to be a 7-figure coach. I want to impact 1 million people. I now feel the juice in that.
Yeah.
And when I look out, and I now think, I'm going to work with this person, and they've got a project that's going to impact 10,000 people. That now meets my goal. This person is going to create a project that's going to impact 100,000 people. Now, that's moving. So it showed up in front of me, and it was about me raising my own standards. That's what started to change my perspective on the world and what I was seeing in front of me.
That's so fascinating, because that's where I am, in a sense, also in my own version of it, which is, let's move beyond what I thought was possible and go for what would be energizing and inspiring and exciting. And I'm doing that, and it's incredible to already start to see, once we first create that unrealistic goal, maybe I could create the structure or system to get there by going this way or going that way. You kind of start to see it happen. And my question is, how do you deal with the challenges that come up when going for that? How do you have that mental toughness of, I'm going to go something for that most people are not audacious and ambitious enough to go for, and when it doesn't work out as we initially planned, and we try plan B or plan C, how do you start to navigate those challenges, which I think maybe are often overlooked when we're saying quadruple your coaching business or create a 7-figure income? I think there's a lot of challenges. What have been some ways that you've been able to navigate that?
I would keep it simple. And I had a challenge this summer. So at the end of last year, start of this year, the coaching business is going really well, creating clients, engaging people, making a real difference, seeing people grow in front of my eyes, beautiful. And then, I've got 2 young kids, and so pretty much from the middle of June to the middle of September, I didn't create any clients. And I suddenly realized I've got no clients, because all my 6-month coaching programs have come to an end and nothing was happening. But I keep it simple. I went out and I started connecting with people again that were in my network, and I started to create those personal conversations. Because I think it always comes down to the person in front of you is the one that makes the difference. So I think there are things you can get tangled up into outside of that. outside of that conversation, but everything comes down to it's in that one-to-one conversation. I think Steve Hardison says on his website, people say to him, how many clients have you got? He said, one, the person in front of me at that point in time. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that if you keep it that simple, you might have these higher level ideas about the impact you want to make. That might bring the person in front of you into that conversation and keep it in that conversation. That's what I found. If I always go back to that simplicity, it seems straightforward. Mm-hmm. When I try and get outside of that and make it more complicated, that's when I run into trouble. When I try other things, that's what distracts me and runs me into trouble.
And how do you, thank you for sharing, and I'm going to just keep going deeper into it so we can see what else we can come up with. So how do you keep that energy of, the energy of, I have a full coaching practice, but with one slot open in it. And there's just this incredible non-neediness, which is just, I'm going to serve you so profoundly. And if it makes sense to move forward, we'll move forward, but it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm just here to serve. There's that place of being. It feels so good. Now, how do we approach this, okay, just focus on the one person in front of you, coming from that type of energy and space when we realize, well, I actually don't have any clients or any income coming in right now. What do I do now?
I think that's a learned thing. I think that's just practice. It comes from a couple of places. I think when I first started, I had to practice that state of being unconditional, which sounds crazy because surely it's a being place, it's a hard place, and yet it's a place that comes from practice. The first time you try it, we haven't got any money and you really need to pay the mortgage and you want to ask for that fee, there's neediness shows up. Mm-hmm. And you notice it and say thanks and let it go. And the next time you ask, it's not so strong and not so strong. So I think when you first start out, it's a state of practice. And it might take 5, 6, 7, or 8 goes to get in that flow. I think once you've been there, so when I came back from the summer and realized I needed to regrow my business, it was relatively straightforward in the sense that I could draw on the experience of having done it before. So I knew it was there. I knew it was possible. Mm. It's simply that I wasn't having the conversations. And it took me about 4 weeks, and my practice filled up again, and it felt good. But it's a great place to talk about. You describe it very, very well. That sense of, I just don't need any of this. I'm doing it because I love it. I'm doing it because I serve. Mm. That's a powerful place to come from. And that's irresistible to clients. It's irresistible to people when they look for transformation. So many people come to coaches, or coaches go to people, and they have a sense of someone's trying to fix me, I'm not broken, I don't need this. That's actually all coming from the coach. It's not from the individual. Huh. It's when you can go to someone and really share with them this irresistible idea that life would be amazing. Yeah. That's when things start to happen.
Yeah, because you bring them from fear into something greater than that, and if they're constantly in fear, it's a hard place to make sustainable changes from. Get burnt out there. But so let's go into these conversations that you're having, because you're having powerful conversations. Your premium package is about £50,000 a year, if I read on your website, and so that's incredible. How has your conversation changed this year than, let's say, 3 years ago? Where are you going now in your conversation to get to the point where someone has had that massive of a experience or a breakthrough or whatever it is that you can enroll at that type of rate?
Okay. So I'm going to go back to 1 point first, though. I mentioned there were 3 points.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for tracking that.
But it's relevant to this, and it's relevant to what I'm going to say now.
Perfect.
The third thing I talked about the state of being, but there's a third thing, which is this inner work. When I was in Liberia and I was standing on the safe side of that invisible line, I had to make a decision to cross that line. I had to make the decision to face a fear inside of me and let it go and just move through it. So even though I was taking action, even though I had this great place of being, fear still show up. There is no doubt that fears still show up. And I've talked to coaches at every level, up to coaches that charge $250,000 plus, and they have the same thing going into that first conversation of, am I worth it? Can I make this happen? Can I ask for this amount of money? It's the same stuff that when you're asking for £30 for your first conversation. So I think there's a really important piece here is we need to accept that fear is there. There are all sorts of fears show up for us. They come from all sorts of places. Notice them, acknowledge them, and let them go. And don't be afraid of them. And I think that's a really important part of the whole process I go through, which is this inner work. It's so important to being free to speak to a client deeply. So I think if you allow for that, how is my conversation different to 3 years ago? First of all, there's that piece of accepting the fear is going to be there and living with it and going through it. 3 years ago, I was a transactional coach. 3 years ago, I'd work with somebody on a specific thing. I'd use some NLP or some Tony Robbins stuff or whatever, and I'd fix what they were working on. I don't do that anymore. I have conversations. I create a space. I allow people to grow in a space. And it's a very natural thing. And what I've noticed about the higher end clients that I'm starting to enroll now, and it was the thing I was most afraid of. I was afraid of powerful clients because I thought they would be more demanding. I thought that they would want more skill. I thought that they would be rechecking the value at every stage. It's the exact opposite of that. Really powerful clients are incredible because they do all the work themselves.
Yeah.
They show up and they do the work and they say thank you and they go away. You know, I create a space for them. I may help them with tiny distinctions, small distinctions. You know, maybe they're very successful in one context and they don't see success in another context. And I might invite them to use the same language or the same thinking in that context, in the new context. And they go, I never thought of that. And a small distinction can make a huge difference for them. And then they go to work on that and they work on it powerfully because they're successful people. So I found working with powerful people so much easier. And the thing about the fees is even funnier because coaches get so tangled up in asking for money. It's one of the areas I see in coaches so often. They get so tangled up in asking for money. And it's a completely arbitrary thing. You know, someone said to me, oh, I can only charge market rate. I have no idea what a market rate is for a coach. I just have no idea. So why not make it up?
Yeah.
And he couldn't be persuaded. So now I ask for fees and see what happens. And then I enrolled a client recently, $25,000. And I said the fee. He just said, yeah, sure, I'll organize that. I enrolled another client recently at $10,000. She said, that's cheap. And I'm like, damn. Because the real stories about the money are our stories, not the client's stories. We have no idea what they think about money. But we have stories about it. We create stories about them. We think a client can only afford so much. Let go of it. If you think something's of a certain value, say that number. And it's a number. It's just a number.
Yeah, cool. And I think there is a distinction between working with people who inspire you versus working with people that you're, let's say, the main source of inspiration. And for a lot of people who are probably watching this now, maybe they're not used to the idea of going out there and working with the person who they're like, man, that person really inspires me. Like, whoa. And I think that's a little bit of a exciting new ballpark to enter.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, because I've enrolled both places. I've enrolled the person who's not done any major work on themselves before, and this is the first time that they're stepping out there and investing a couple $1,000s into themselves. And then I've enrolled the person who's already a rock star and the person who I'm like, man, I'm so excited. I get to talk to you every week. And it was a very different process for me. I mean, the principles were almost the same because it's service and it's slowing down and these types of things. But it seems just like that the person who was the rock star already had that level of consciousness that they just saw how they weren't going to let fear get in their way of moving forward. They were used to the fear already.
Right. Yeah.
When you were working with people who maybe weren't at that space, and they would say, oh, well, that is a lot of money, or wow, I don't know if I can afford that. How would you start to navigate that, especially if you got an unattached sense that this is the best decision they can make, is to move forward and do this work with me? How do you start to navigate that part of like, the money is too much here? It's
a great question. I'm not sure I've got a great answer. I think that in my last year, earlier this year, I probably had a weakness, which was I was allowing myself to pitch at a level I thought they could afford.
Huh.
I wasn't stretching them enough. So I agree with your question. I think it's a great question. I've had a couple of clients recently who said, this money's too much. And I said, it's a lot of money, sure. And then what's been interesting with them is I haven't pursued them in terms of trying to convert them to be from a place of, I'm sure I can afford this, to I can afford this. But what I have done is I've continued to serve them. And what I've typically done is taken the proposal off the table. What I've said is, look, if it's not for you now, let's take it off the table. Let's have a think for a couple of weeks and then have another call, and we'll have another call, and I'll continue to serve them. What I am confident in is that at the time that I made that proposal, a deeper part of me was thinking, I haven't taken them far enough yet. They haven't experienced me enough yet to make that investment. I believe they will. So I continue with that belief. I believe that they will get value from this. I believe I'll continue to serve them. And so I just continue to serve them anyway. And if they do continue, that's great. If they don't, that's great too. But what I have done is very definitely not leave the proposal out there. I've taken it off the table. And that's, it's an area where I'm still exploring. I don't have a fantastic answer yet. And it's one that is an area of learning for me.
Huh. Well, I appreciate your vulnerability and you just sharing what's coming up for you. In the spirit of that, in the spirit of you being super vulnerable, what's one of the biggest either black holes or kind of traps that you can find yourself falling into, especially kind of now that you're doing things that are more exponential? Like, what's the kryptonite there that could stop that?
I think there's two things for me. We work in a similar community, and a lot of our community play games about getting no's and going out and getting a business and, pushing yourself to make a proposal, all that sort of stuff. That to me is a black hole. When I do that, I tend to fail. I feel that when I rush and I try and make something happen, I try and force something to happen, I tend to fail. And I like to slow down and work at my pace and let things grow organically. That's definitely what I'm comfortable with. And I believe I can still raise the game very significantly doing it organically. I don't need to press. I think the other one, which is, it is one that I consider, I don't have a great answer for it yet, but it's one that definitely shows up, is that it happened about a month ago. As I say, I sat down, I wanted to refill my practice. I did it in 4 weeks. And you kind of sit back thinking, I'm pretty good at this. Oh, that's a big error. That's a big mistake, thinking you're good, because,
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, yep.
Because so much energy shifts.
Yep.
That there's not the edge. Your level of service is not quite as fearless and brave as it could be. You don't push the envelope anymore. So there are, and the motivation shifts as well. So there are many aspects of, I think I'm quite good, or I've got there, that actually is the black hole. And it's how do you get to that point and go, yeah, so now I'm ready to go to the next level. My son is 9 and he's phenomenal at Taekwondo. So even though he's very young, next year he'll be doing his black belt.
Wow.
Which is fantastic. And here's the thing about martial arts. I don't know if you do martial arts, but here's the thing about martial arts. The majority of people in martial arts go through all the different belts and they get to black belt and they think that's it, I've arrived. But black belt is really the entry level to really start to learn. Black belt is when black belt says, I've done enough practice to know all the moves. Now I can really start the inner game. And I think that the game we're playing is a bit like we've got our belt and we think, whoa, we can do this. And then remembering, actually, this is just the start of the next level, not the end of anything else. And I think it's keeping that edge is really important. And I definitely had that energy about a month ago, and it was a nervy time for me. It felt, I could feel it wasn't right. And I had to get back into I'm doing the next level now.
Yeah, and that's where I'm at also right now. Like, I'm enrolling for another retreat. I just did my first retreat in Bali. So we had 18 people come to Bali. It was the first time I ever did anything in person ever, no less, to have 18 people come to Bali. It was incredible. And I'm just like, I want to recreate this. This is magnificent. Like, this was one of the coolest experiences ever. And so I'm enrolling for that project again now. And I got on the phone and number 1 enrolled, number 2, 3, 4, 5, right away, all enrolled. And I'm like, man, I got really good at enrolling. I'm really good at this now. And so it's 2 weeks later, we're still at 5 people.
Yeah, I know.
I'm like, oh man, it's time to press pause and just like go, reconnect to why you're doing this and to how it works. And so that's why I'm actually pressing pause on it just for a moment now while I'm doing these interviews.
Yeah, same thing. It's very familiar saying, which is your success is your greatest weakness. So whatever got you here is not going to get you to the next level. And I think what happens is people get to that level, then they plateau. And then the cheese is gone, to mix metaphors there.
So I'm really interested in this quote because I've heard this a couple times, which is like, what got you to this level is not going to get you to the next level. And I'd love to make the distinction about this quote because I feel like in some part it is going to get me to that level. But I think that perhaps the distinction is between the virtue we need to embody versus the strategy that we need to apply. So I feel like it is the virtue of being courageous, of being willing to learn, of being willing to show up persistently and patiently and diligently. I think that's what got me to this level, and that's what's going to get me to the next. But perhaps the strategy, the same approach that I took as far as the specific actions will need to change. That's kind of my take on that quote. How does that sit with you?
I think it's a good distinction. And I go back to martial arts. What gets you to a red belt is dedication, discipline, learning, but it's not going to get you to a black belt. You need to do some different things. And some of it is the things you already do, you need to do at a deeper level. So you need a little bit more courage, a little bit greater fearlessness, a bit more strength, and you need some new strategies. You need some different strategies. You need to learn different moves, different attack, different defense. So to use the martial arts metaphor, I think that it fits with what you're saying, and I think that the virtues you already described, you need to enhance those too. Because at the higher level, I used to work in corporate life, and I ended up being a director of one of the biggest companies in the UK. And the decisions that you make at that level require a different depth of courage than they do when you're working on a project that's like 3 people. When it's 3,000 people, the consequences are very, very different. And the way you deal with that, even the inner virtues you talk about, the way you deal with that are quite different.
Okay, I like it. Thank you for bringing us deeper with that. Because I've heard that a couple times, and I'm like, okay. So I appreciate you taking us deeper with that.
And I think just to take that as well, and again, thinking about both my corporate life and my coaching life, the other distinction I'll make, and again, it builds on what you're saying, is when you get to a certain point, it's make a choice about the assets and resources that you want to keep and those you just want to let go of so you can bring in something new. And I think that's just part of the skill. And again, it goes back to this Peter principle. People get to a level where they stop. Now, hopefully with coaching, I'm not at that place yet. I still see a lot further to go.
Yeah.
But I also know that definitely the strategies that I was using to get the clients I've had in the past will not work for the clients I want in the future. But also, I think that the beliefs I carry and the fearlessness I carry will also need to change. So I think those will also need to go through a shift to get to that next level.
Cool. Well, thanks for unpacking that. So wrapping up, kind of going into the end or towards the end of this conversation, I have 2 questions that come to mind. And the first is, you're in a community filled with coaches. You talk to coaches all the time. You support coaches. What do you see in common with the most successful coaches who are growing their business exponentially? Not just the coaches who are maybe getting a couple clients, but the ones who are really thriving, who are just it's very inspiring to maybe have a level of success beyond what's the norm. What do you see in common with these types of coaches?
I think 2 things come to my mind immediately. And this is true for the community that I'm in. I know we share a lot about community. I think there are different kinds of coaches out there. For this community, I think it's two things. It's courage and consistency. In fact, I'd say it's three things. It's courage, consistency, and conversation. It's having conversations when possible. It's being consistent with that. Because I know myself, when I wasn't consistent with that, my practice emptied. When I re-pressed the consistency button, it filled up again. So, there's a direct relationship between the number of conversations I'm consistently having and having people in my practice. And the courage piece comes at so many levels. Because one of the things I talk about in my community is how we get higher fees. And, I've been criticized for making it about the money. And the point I make, it's nothing to do with the money. It's all about the impact you have. Money is merely a reflection of the level of impact you have. If you never want to make a dime from coaching, that's great, but you still need to have great impact. A great coach has great impact. And that comes from courage. It comes from doing our inner work and overcoming our fears so we can really take our clients to places that no one's ever taken them before. And when you do that, you have great impact. When you have great impact, you can command any fee you want. So you can choose if you want a high fee or not. It doesn't matter whether you want high money or not, but you've got to have the impact. And that comes from courage.
And what do you feel like the biggest either superstitions around money are or limiting beliefs? I mean, for me, the ones that come up are, especially in the spiritual world, like you can't be spiritual and rich, or if you're truly helping someone, then you shouldn't be charging, or like, especially this one, once you can support yourself and kind of take care of yourself and your business, anything more is greedy. What are the ones that you see coming up for the people you're supporting, and how do you help them navigate them?
So there are so many, and I say there are so many because I play a game. I play a game, and if you, speaking to your audience, if you've got an issue with money, this is a great game to play. You get 3 big sheets of paper, and you write at the top of the first sheet of paper, what is money? And you start writing the answer to that question. Just start writing answers to that question for at least 10 minutes. Because if you take the first 3 answers, they're bullshit. It's when you get to answer 18, 19, 20, 21,
Yeah.
And there might be something about some deeper belief you got from your parents, your uncle, from something you read about money being bad or good or dirty or whatever it is, some association you have. Go deep with those beliefs. And the second page is, what was money in the past? So what are the historic beliefs you have around money? And then the third piece of paper is, what is money in the future? Because now it's about making a choice. Now you've actually, hopefully, got all your beliefs out about money, and in a sort of 20, 30-minute period. Then sit with a piece of paper and say, what is money in the future? Because then you can create whatever you want with money, whether it's impact, a reflection of power, a reflection of the depth of service, whether it's to support a charity. No matter what it is for you in the future, you can now create that. You can now cast off whatever's been holding you back. So I don't think I would like to pick out one thing that people have in common around money. Because when I play this game, it's hundreds of things come up, from people's past, their beliefs around it. But what's more important is, what do they make money in the future? That's what really makes the difference. And if you want to be a rich coach, why not? There's no rules against that. If you want to be the most charitable coach, that's great too. It's up to the individual to make that choice. Beautiful.
Well, that's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with us. And the final question, and I say this sometimes, and then I'm like, wait, no, one more. But the final question that I at this point can sense would be, what's the number one thing that you now know about growing your coaching biz that you wish you knew before you got to the 6-figure mark?
One thing. I'm going to go back to what I've said consistently on this call, which is simply connect with people and have conversations. I thought it was something more than that. I needed more skill, more talent, more certification, more frameworks, more marketing, more emails. It was none of that stuff. It was sitting with someone like this and having a powerful conversation. It changes everything. It changes everything, including me.
Yeah, cool, dude. Well, thank you so much. For the people watching, how can they continue to stay connected with you and your work and just more deeply engage with that?
Oh, well, thank you for that. If you're on Facebook, you can search for Coaching Unlimited. It's a private group, and come and join the conversation. It's no sales. It's all about conversation. It's about connecting with people and sharing your experiences. My webpage is the freedomfactory.com. And if you're in Europe or want to travel from the US, I run events regularly called Love, Serve, Create. And that's on my website. And they're weekend events for coaches. And we go deep, we go vulnerable, we face fears. It's powerful stuff.
Cool. Well, a deep bow to you and your wisdom. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Pleasure.
All right, cool.
Thank you.
So, what was your biggest takeaway from that interview? Shoot me a tweet at Jacob Sokol with the hashtag 4XCB, like 4 times coaching business, and let me know. Now, if you're already running a successful coaching biz and want to take it to the next level, I'm hand selecting 7 coaches to join me in an exotic mansion for a month to work side by side together as they quadruple their coaching business. The project's called the Quad Crib, and it's the only way to work with me one-on-one 2015. To apply, go to thequadcrib.com. That's the QUAD crib.com. Alright, yo, talk soon. Peace.